Hello, my name is Almeida, PhD candidate at Nova University of Lisbon, co-presenting with Patrícia Nogueira, professor at the University of Maia and researcher at iNOVA Media Lab. We are going to present our paper titled Archival Imaginaries, the Use and Repurpose of Archive Footage in Interactive Documentaries. We are glad to be part of the 2022 Interactive Film and Media International Conference. Thank you for having us. The repurpose of archives into nonfiction narratives through montage strategies establish new ways of interpreting and reading these materials. From the concept of compilation film by Gilletta in 1964 to the archive material as a mutable point of reference as identified by Stella Bruzzi, to the notion of the archive effect as an experience of reception, as asserted by Jamie Barron in 2014, we underline the consciousness presence of the archive in documentary filmmaking. Additionally, Haggith argues that it is also creatively ambitious to be so reliant on archive footage that you will use it as generic illustration or wallpaper. And moreover, he asserts that if you cannot find archive that is directly relevant, think another method of illustrating the story. When archives are recontextualizing new narratives, the montage works as a double operation of separation and contiguity, enabling a practice that takes place at the table du montage, an act of decision, cutting, selecting the images, and their position to each other.
So we decided to focus on understanding the significance of migrating analog historical archives to the digital context, and particularly to interactive documentaries. We believe that transferring archives from the analog to the digital domain is more than a process of digitization. It's a process that calls into question the archive's materiality and physicality while generating new dynamics between archival material and other media formats. Also considering the interactivity, feedback, and instant access to archival materials. In interactive documentary, through participatory and multiple choice practices, the audience may establish a diversity of connections between archive and the other contents, opening the historical account to multiple readings. In fact, in a database logic, and in a certain sense, all interactive documentary contents become archival material. And this is a perspective that extends the concept of archive, embracing various materials, sources, and formats within the archive of interactive documentary, and exploring the intermediality of the audience's experience.
The intentions behind the gestures of appropriation and manipulation of archive footage in interactive documentaries contribute with additional layers of intertextual analysis, demanding us to reconsider the meaning of images. Therefore, we draw upon de Jong's taxonomy to analyze how documentary filmmaking uses archival footage to address and examine the repurpose of archives in interactive documentaries. According to Wilma de Jong, archive footage may be recontextualized in documentary filmmaking in 5 modes: as an illustration or wallpaper serving as a visual reference, as a historical backdrop for setting the scene regarding a specific historic period. It can be used as a metaphorical tool intended to create layers of critical, comic, or poetic tone made through montage strategies. It can be used as a narrative resource used to create a dramatic arc. And finally, the archive as legal evidence, an indexical link to past events which can be used in court cases. Moreover, we examine those archives through the lens of the image archive, a concept by D.D. Huberman. As an object, the image archive requires the establishment of imaginative and speculative relationships in order to become decipherable and significant. Encompassing their correlation with the surrounding elements, aesthetics, and navigation interface. From the audience perspective, reading and interacting with archives within interactive documentaries requires time and imagination, which may be influenced by other textual, visual, or audio elements.
For this paper, we decided to analyze two interactive documentaries and their use of archival materials. Welcome to Pine Point, which uses home movies, family photographs, and further archival materials to create an interactive documentary around the memory and the stories of the city of Pine Point, and a short history of the high-rise that approaches the issue of vertical living in high-rise buildings throughout 2,500 years, using mostly archives of photographs combining with paintings, illustrations, documents, and digital images. The two interactive documentaries are built on archival materials, reviving the past and combining these contents with other media content formats, and both present a booth structure narrative. This means we navigate through the contents as if we were leafing through a storybook. But while Welcome to Pine Point focus on individual memories to create a kind of collective account of the past, A Short History of the High Rise follows a chronological historical account beginning 2,500 years ago, as I said, until nowadays, when the documentary includes contributions from the audience into a collective digital archive.
Welcome to Pine Point, created by Paul Shoebridge and Mike Siemens in 2011 and produced by the National Film Board of Canada, gathers home videos, family album photographs, and testimonies in a revival of a Canadian city that vanished after its mine closed in 1988. The interactive documentary unfolds like a storybook divided into 10 chapters. On the landing page, as we click play under the VHS tape animated icon, we enter a multi-layered environment, a combination of family photography, animation, illustration, and moving images. By turning the web pages and navigating through the story, interacting and listening, we discover the town's brief history and the personal memories, stories that inhabit the territory, both reviving the past and getting to know the characters' present selves. Departing from the Young's taxonomy, Welcome to Pine Point approaches archives in 3 of the 5 proposed categories: illustrative, setting the scene to provide a historical backdrop, or as a narrative resource. Moreover, the allocation of snippets of text over the archive or the presence of a voiceover may transform the interactor's initial perception. At the beginning of the chapter intro in the Pine Point Revisit book page, we find heterogeneous snapshots referring to different outlines. In one of the book pages above some photographs, we can read, "The photos have scratches, wrinkles, and dust." This collection of amateur photographs and the acknowledgement of their materiality provides an additional layer for imagining the past, since those features brings us to a time when there were no continuous records of everyday life. In this case, the lack of everyday records become an opportunity to go dive into albums from other families that reveal similarities to our own memories. We can read, "They remind me of my own family album." This operates as evidence of the past for the creators themselves and provides a historical backdrop for the city and its community. At the end of the chapter intro, we encounter a home video titled "Final Winter Carnival, Pine Point Arena, 1987, where we can observe the kids in costumes getting in a nice arena, and we can read this short strip of text. The mine closed in 1987. And it's followed by other sentences, one of them being, "Most Pine Pointers think their hometown was the best place on earth to have lived." The contrast between the archival footage and the text promotes the repurpose of the archive as a narrative resource, establishing a dramatic arc, with images leading the story rather than following it, as written in the Young's text. Moreover, this overlapping of moving image and textual information contributes to the nostalgic tone of the narrative. Although most of this material tends to be illustrative, there is a significantly different approach to the visual footage that involves digitally cutting figures from the photographs, reframing the photographs in which we can only see bits of family and friends gatherings, from using the videos to create a parallel narrative between the digitized home videos and digital records of Pine Pointer's soundscape. Moreover, in the chapter Pine Pointers, the scrapbook imagery collage creates a moment of an in-between in the composition of family album photographs, underlining the decision to hide or make visible certain parts of the imagery, and considering what are the meanings that come forward by these visual interferences. The past and the present are always remaining clues in this interactive documentary tone and in the interactive strategy towards archival footage, relying on the interactor's imagination to delve into the narrative and follow the clusters of memories. Mapping recollections and records can help to reveal both the social history of the place and micro-personal histories, while taking into further consideration the meaning of images and their contribution to the dialogue within interactive documentaries.
Not so very long ago, though the city of New York was still young, from the land beside Central Park, a new sort of building sprung.
A Short History of the High-Rise is one of several interactive projects directed by Katerina Sizek approaching the issue of vertical living. This interactive documentary explores the historical, social, economical, and cultural consequences of vertical living in an increasingly urbanized world. The documentary presents a retrospective on the history of high-rise, following a linear narrative through a voiceover narration, and is structured as a storybook in a chronological account. The narrative is divided into 4 chapters, each one of them devoted to a specific time period and to a kind of construction material. The first chapter is devoted to mud, the second one to concrete, the third one to glass, and the last chapter, home, compiles contributions from the interactors. Then each chapter is subdivided in thematic sections and provides extra visual and sound contents to expand the narrative, allowing the audience to delve into additional information by exploring extra archival material such as photographs and postcards with notations in the back.
Looking back now, it's hard to believe there ever was a time when the standard high-rise was so universally beloved and in its prime.
A Short History of the High-Rise is mainly constructed out of archival materials containing more than 100 historical photographs. Following Wilma de Jong's taxonomy to analyze these materials, we understand they are mainly employed in 2 of the 5 dimensions proposed by the author, as illustrations or wallpapers, and, on the other hand, to setting the field, providing a historical backdrop. Beginning by the archives that are used as historical backdrop or to setting the scene, as de Jong terms it, the 66 pictures framed under this category are distributed throughout the entire documentary to present a narrative description of past moments, depicting the social, economical, and cultural events, causes, and consequences around the issues of vertical living. The archival photographs are reused to introduce specific moments of the historical account, such as the beginnings of the high-rises in the 1900s in New York, the demolition of the Pruitt-Igoe public housing, the New Deal, the baby boom period, and more recently, the gentrification problem around the building where hip-hop was invented. These photographs also portray archaeological sites, as the Montezuma Palace, for instance, and are adopted to sit the work of artists such as Louis Hine and Jacob Riis, for instance. Wilma de Jong underlines that the repeated use of the same archival material to address historical events may reinforce stereotypes, but on the other hand, we consider that associating familiar images to historical periods will draw a collective imaginary that may enhance affiliation among users who share common references. The interactive documentary presents archival materials as illustrations, mostly in the second chapter, to depict the development of high-rise buildings in different parts of the world, also to represent the invention of and development of concrete, and while talking about concrete and public housing during the Great Depression. In this case, the photographs are used and edited simply to create a visual reference to the voiceover narration, providing to the audience an indexical clue to the discourse. At the end of chapter 3, in the subtopic Renewal, several animated images, some of them repeated from previous chapters, convey an accelerated passage of time and move through the fast development of the high-rises. According to de Jong, this approach may be framed as a narrative resource to create a dramatic arc and move the story forward, as a strategy of, and I'm quoting here, narrativization of archive footage. Something interesting in that we would like to underline regarding the migration of analog archives to digital experience is how a short history of the high-rise foregrounds the archival materiality by including their catalog numbers, handwritten and typewritten notations, newspaper cuts, and stamps. Whereas the digitization of the archives may diminish the physical experience of the artifact, these analog superimposed editions underline the archive's original materiality and enhance the sense of historical tangibility. The fourth chapter, entitled Home, comprises 186 photographs that are contributions from the audience across the world, portraying their experiences of living in high-rise buildings. The photographs are originally digital and presented as a slideshow. We are talking about digital personal records of everyday life, such as the ones we publish in social media. But these could be considered as the new digital archives, generated and shared by the users. Although these records are not historical per se, instead of representing traditional archival materials for reconnecting audiences with the past, they represent a potential unique archival value when recontextualized within interactive documentaries, engaging the users with the present. Regarding the analysis of the archive through the concept of image archive, a concept developed by Georges Didier Huberman, the archival materials are interconnected with other media contents and formats, such as illustrations, paintings, textual and graphic elements. Also, the documentary's narrative is sustained in the sound design composed by diegetic ambient sound and voiceover narration, which together guide the audience throughout the story. Although all the contents are originally still images, the documentary forges the illusion of movement, not only by ascribing a certain temporality to the images, as also animating certain compositional elements such as buildings rising, clouds moving over our heads, or birds flying in the sky, to provide a video-like experience. By combining and superimposing the various media within the screen, A Short History of the High-Rise establishes dialogues between heterogeneous and fragmented media formats to create a kind of media palimpsest, densely layered, where the images flow and invite the users to interact with the world portrayed. Without any footage or cinematographic contents of any sort, A Short History of the High-Rise foregrounds the way in which interactive documentaries are privileged spaces to incorporate all other media formats, opening space to multiple readings and archival imaginaries.
The two interactive documentaries reuse archives with the same approach that traditional documentary practices do, by validating or reviving memories and reanimating the past. Nonetheless, besides the traditional recontextualization, both interactive documentaries interconnect additional layers of engagement in interpretation, prompted by the intermediality of the experience and by their inherent gestures of interaction. This perspective delves beyond the mere wallpaper use of the archive and contributes to a broader and more intricate perception while charging the narrative with extra meaningful ways of watching, listening, and interacting, consistent with the image archive concept of Didier Huberman. The author's imaginaries may emerge from the juxtaposition of the archive footage its materiality with other audio and visual elements, allowing for this repurposing to disclose further meanings. Moreover, the interaction between text and the user's imagination becomes a reciprocal dialogue of meaning and in interpretation. Hence, the process of interacting with multiple layers of content and imagining various readings contribute to diverse approaches of recontextualizing and manipulating archives while addressing individual and collective issues.
When reconfigured in an interactive documentary, the archive becomes a dynamic, interpreted experience. Multiple layers of meaning expressed through sound, image, text, and other archival materials allow the users to develop stories with multiple interconnection, which mirror the ways in which audiences relate to historical archives. The experience of navigating through the storyline and exploring the contents while listening to the narration provides a dynamic relation between the interactor and the historical account. This interactive engagement contributes to a networked experience in a way that would have been impossible otherwise. Moreover, whereas in traditional documentary formats, the director reconfigures the archive to present her or his own point of view, centering the perspective on the authorial stance, in interactive documentaries, the creator proposes a multiplicity of pathways to interconnect archival materials with other digital contents and generate a manifold of intersubjective perspectives, opening breadth to multiple archival imaginaries. Anne and I thank you for your attention.